Imagine being a combat veteran who lost friends on the battlefield. Imagine piloting Apache helicopters through hostile fire and carrying the weight of war for 2 decades, only to have someone who never served diminish your sacrifice. That is exactly what happened this week when President Donald Trump made comments about NATO troops in Afghanistan that sparked one of the most intense diplomatic firestorms of 2026. And the person who responded? Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. A man who doesn't just talk about war from a podium, but who lived it, bled in it, and lost brothers in arms in it. This is a story about honor, sacrifice, historical truth, and the collision between military service and political rhetoric. Buckle up, because what started as an offhand comment in Davos has become an international incident that is shaking the foundations of the world's most powerful military alliance. Let's set the scene. It is January 23, 2026. President Donald Trump is in Davos, Switzerland, attending the World Economic Forum. He has already made headlines this week with his aggressive push to acquire Greenland and threats of tariffs against European nations. But then, in an interview with Fox Business, he drops a bombshell that will reverberate across the Atlantic. Trump's exact words were, "We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. They'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines." Them being NATO allies, the troops being soldiers from the United Kingdom, Canada, France, Germany, Denmark, Poland, and dozens of other nations who answered America's call after September 11, 2001. To understand why this is so explosive, we need to go back. On September 12, 2001, one day after the worst terrorist attack on American soil, NATO invoked Article 5 of its charter for the first and only time in the alliance's history. Article 5 states that an attack on one member is an attack on all members. It meant that every NATO nation was obligated to stand with the United States, and they did, for 20 years. Over 150,000 British troops served in Afghanistan. Canada sent its soldiers to Kandahar, one of the most dangerous provinces. French forces deployed to the Tagab Valley. Danish troops fought in Helmand Province. German soldiers patrolled deadly roads. Polish special forces hunted insurgents. They didn't stay a little back. They bled. They died. They came home in flag-draped coffins. Let's talk cold, hard statistics, because numbers tell a story that political spin cannot erase. Total coalition deaths in Afghanistan were approximately 3,500 soldiers. The breakdown includes nearly 2,500 Americans. That is about 68% of the total, and every single one of those losses is a tragedy. But here is what Trump apparently doesn't know or chooses to ignore regarding the rest of those numbers. The United Kingdom, 457 dead, over 2,000 wounded. Canada, 158 killed in action. France, 90 soldiers never came home. Germany, 60 fatalities. Denmark lost 44 soldiers, the highest per capita death rate of any coalition member. Poland, 44 fallen soldiers. Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Australia, and dozens more nations all paid in blood. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte put it perfectly when he confronted Trump just days earlier in Davos. He said, "For every 2 Americans who paid the ultimate price, there was 1 soldier from another NATO country who did not come back to his family." Think about that ratio. For every 2 American families grieving a fallen soldier, 1 non-American family was doing the same. These weren't troops staying back. These were frontline warriors fighting alongside their American brothers and sisters. Former U.S. Admiral James Stavridis, who served as NATO's supreme allied commander, responded to Trump's comments with barely contained fury, saying, "Hundreds of NATO troops died under my command on the front lines in Afghanistan. I honor their memory every single day." This brings us to the most compelling voice in this entire controversy, Prince Harry. Here is what makes Harry's response so powerful. He is not a politician pontificating from the safety of an office. He is not a talking head on television. He is a combat veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. His first tour was in 2007 as a forward air controller in Helmand Province, one of the deadliest regions of Afghanistan. His second tour was in 2012 as an Apache helicopter pilot and gunner. In his memoir, Spare, Harry revealed the brutal reality of his service, noting he killed enemy combatants. Whether you agree with his decision to share that number or not, it tells you one thing. This man saw combat, real combat. Harry's statement in response to Trump was measured but devastating. He said, "In 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in history. It meant that every allied nation was obliged to stand with the United States in Afghanistan in pursuit of our shared security. Allies answered that call. I served there, I made lifelong friends there, and I lost friends there. The United Kingdom alone had 457 service personnel killed." He continued, "Thousands of lives were changed forever. Mothers and fathers buried sons and daughters. Children were left without a parent. Families are left carrying the cost. Those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect, as we all remain united and loyal to the defense of diplomacy and peace. Notice what Harry did there. He didn't attack Trump personally. He didn't get political. He simply stated facts and demanded respect for the fallen. It is the response of a soldier, not a politician. And that makes it infinitely more powerful. Prince Harry wasn't alone in his outrage. The entire United Kingdom, from the Prime Minister to Gold Star mothers, rose up in unprecedented unity. Prime Minister Keir Starmer called Trump's comments insulting and frankly appalling, stating directly that if he had misspoken in such a way, he would certainly apologize. Defense Secretary John Healey reminded everyone that those British troops should be remembered for who they were, heroes who gave their lives in service of their nation. But perhaps the most heart-wrenching responses came from the families of the fallen. Lucy Aldridge, whose son William was killed at age 18 in a 2009 bomb blast while trying to save fellow troops, said she was not just deeply offended, but deeply disgusted. She noted that this wasn't just misspeaking. It was an offense to every family who never saw their loved ones come home. Diane Durney, whose son Ben Parkinson suffered catastrophic injuries when his Land Rover hit a mine, called Trump's comments the ultimate insult. These aren't political operatives. These are mothers who buried sons, fathers who received folded flags, and Trump just told them their loved ones stayed back. The anger wasn't confined to Britain. Across Europe, leaders and veterans expressed shock and fury. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk recalled standing with American officers at a farewell ceremony for fallen Polish soldiers, noting that those Americans promised to never forget the Polish heroes. Tusk grimly suggested that perhaps they should remind President Trump of that fact. France's Armed Forces Minister reminded the world that 90 French soldiers died following the activation of Article 5. Adding fuel to the fire, many British and European politicians pointed out a glaring irony. Trump never served in the military. During the Vietnam War, Trump received 5 draft deferments, 4 for education and 1 for bone spurs. He has never experienced combat, never worn a uniform, never felt the weight of losing a comrade in battle. British author Stephen Stewart, who wrote about his time embedded with troops, called it hugely ironic that someone who avoided the draft would make such a disgraceful statement. You might expect that, faced with such overwhelming backlash from America's closest allies, the White House would walk back the comments, issue a clarification, or at minimum express respect for fallen NATO soldiers. They did none of those things. Instead, the White House doubled down. Spokeswoman Taylor Rogers stated that President Trump is absolutely right, claiming the U.S. has done more for NATO than any other country combined. They turned a conversation about blood sacrifice into a debate about defense spending, completely ignoring the 1,000-plus non-American soldiers who died fighting America's war. This controversy didn't emerge in a vacuum. It is part of a larger pattern of Trump questioning and undermining the NATO alliance. Just this month, he has threatened tariffs on allies, doubted whether NATO would defend the U.S., and posted on Truth Social that he doubts NATO would be there if America needed them. This is particularly galling because Article 5 has only been invoked once, and it was invoked for the United States. America asked for help. NATO answered. Even Trump's own Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has mocked NATO contributions, joking in June that ISAF stood for I Saw Americans Fighting. That is not just dismissive. It is factually wrong and deeply disrespectful. Let's set the record straight with specific examples of NATO valor. From 2006 onwards, British troops took responsibility for Helmand Province, engaging in some of the fiercest combat of the entire war in places like Sangin and Musa Qala. They were the tip of the spear. Canadian troops took responsibility for Kandahar, suffering 158 fatalities in their deadliest military mission since the Korean War. In 2008, French forces were ambushed in the Uzbek Valley, losing 10 soldiers in a single day. This wasn't staying back. This was walking into hell. Denmark, with a population of just under 6 million, lost 44 soldiers, proportional losses that matched or exceeded American rates. Polish special forces conducted high-risk missions alongside American counterparts. These are accounts of courage, sacrifice, and brothers in arms fighting together. This controversy comes at perhaps the worst possible time for transatlantic relations. Russia, China, and North Korea are watching. They are seeing the leader of the United States publicly undermining the alliance that has been the cornerstone of Western security for 75 years. Former NATO officials warn that when an American president questions the alliance, it emboldens adversaries and dishonors the memory of those who died. But let's remember that behind every statistic is a human being. Rifleman William Aldridge was 18 years old when he ran toward danger to save others and was killed. Ben Parkinson lost both legs and suffered brain injuries, sacrificing his entire future. Corporal Doug Grant of the New Zealand SAS was killed in Kabul. Canadian Captain Nicola Goddard was the first Canadian female soldier killed in combat, dying while calling in fire support for her troops. She didn't stay back. She was leading from the front. These stories could fill volumes, each one a tragedy, each one a sacrifice made in support of the United States of America. The question now is, where do we go from here? Can these diplomatic wounds be healed? Some European leaders are already calling for a strategic autonomy, a defense capability independent of the United States. Trump's comments may accelerate that movement. But there is also the question of historical memory. Will future generations remember the Afghanistan war as a shared sacrifice, or will this kind of rhetoric rewrite history? Prince Harry's statement included a powerful reminder: those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect. Truth, respect, unity, peace. These aren't partisan concepts. This story matters because words have consequences. When the President of the United States dismisses the sacrifices of Allied soldiers, it dishonors the memory of the fallen and insults the families who lost loved ones. It undermines the most successful military alliance in history. It matters because 457 British mothers and fathers will never see their children again, because 158 Canadian families have empty chairs at their dinner tables, because 90 French soldiers never came home. They didn't do it for glory or political gain. They did it because on September 12, 2001, when America needed help, they answered the call. This controversy will eventually fade from the headlines, but the families of the fallen will remember. The veterans who served will remember. History will remember too. Not the spin, but the facts. The facts are simple. NATO invoked Article 5 to defend the United States. Allied nations sent their sons and daughters to fight in Afghanistan for 20 years. Over 1,000 non-American NATO soldiers died. They didn't stay back. They stood shoulder to shoulder with American troops. They shared the burden. They paid the price. Prince Harry, who knows war in ways most of us never will, reminded us of something essential. Those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully. In an era of political division, maybe that is the lesson we all need to remember. The soldiers who fought in Afghanistan, American and Allied alike, deserve nothing less. They answered the call. The least we can do is remember them honestly.